In a forgotten corner of a small town stood an old brick warehouse. Dust danced in the shafts of light that cut through the cracked windows. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of age and storage. It was here that Jake spent most of his days. At 25, he was a hard worker, hauling boxes filled with everything from dusty old books to forgotten trinkets. He lifted, carried, and stacked. It was grueling work, but it gave him a sense of purpose, a rhythm that he grew used to. One gray afternoon, while the clouds hung low and heavy, Jake was in the back of the warehouse. He bent down to grab another box, muscles straining. He felt the familiar pull in his shoulders as he straightened up, his breath puffing out in small clouds from the effort. But there was something different in the air today. Perhaps it was the quiet, the sort of stillness that makes you feel like something's about to happen. As he turned to walk toward the front, his foot slipped on something small and hard. Jake stumbled, the box in his hands wobbling dangerously. He managed to catch it just in time, the cardboard crinkling under the pressure. He set it down and looked around. It was then that he noticed a patch of peeling paint on the wall beside him. Curious, he stepped closer. He brushed off the remnants of what once was a vibrant mural and revealed faded outlines beneath the grime. And there it was, a face. The features were soft, but the eyes, they seemed to watch him. For a fleeting moment, Jake felt a chill run down his spine, like a whisper of recognition. He had seen this face before, but he couldn't place it. Shaking off the odd feeling, he continued with his work, but the face lingered in the back of his mind. Days passed, and each time Jake returned to the warehouse, he found himself glancing at that wall. The more he stared, the more he felt an unexplainable connection. The eyes seemed to draw him in, as if trying to tell him a story. He began to wonder. Who was this person? Why was their face hidden in this dusty old place? It was just a ghost of paint, but it felt as real as the boxes he moved. While taking a break, Jake decided to talk to Gary, his supervisor. Gary was a gruff, no-nonsense kind of guy, but there was a hint of kindness that showed up now and then. "Hey, Gary," Jake said, wiping his brow. Gary paused, his brow furrowing. He chuckled. "I thought it was just a stain." Jake shook his head. "No, really, I think it's a face." "No idea," Gary shrugged, and then in a softer tone added, "But if you want to know something about this place, you should ask Mrs. Hargrove." Intrigued, Jake decided he would. The next day after work, he made his way to Mrs. Hargrove's cottage. She was an elderly woman with a crooked smile and a warmth that wrapped around you like a cozy blanket. As he approached, her eyes twinkled with the wisdom of 100 stories. "Jake," she exclaimed as he stepped onto her porch. He hesitated, but then found the words. "I saw a face on the wall at the warehouse. I think it's a painting, but it looks like someone important." Mrs. Hargrove's smile faded, replaced by a shadow of memory. "Ah, yes, that face. It belongs to a young woman from many years ago." Jake's heart raced. Sophie. Mrs. Hargrove leaned against the porch railing, nostalgia washing over her. Sophie was a bright light in the community, full of life and dreams. She helped many people, but one day she paused, looking lost in a memory. She vanished. Jake pressed, leaning closer. He could feel the mystery wrapping around him. "They say she went into the woods one night. The town searched, but they found nothing. Some think she was taken, while others believe she ran away to find a new life, but her face was left behind." Jake's pulse quickened. He had spent so much time staring at a face that belonged to someone lost, but why did it resonate with him? As he left Mrs. Hargrove's home, he felt unsettled yet curious. What was it about Sophie's story that held him captive? Back at the warehouse, the dim light cast shadows that flickered as Jake passed the boxes. He felt the familiar pull of the wall, the urgency to see Sophie's face one more time. As he approached, he felt the tension in the air reach its peak. This wasn't just a painting. It was a marker of something deeper, something that needed to be discovered. He reached out to touch the paint, feeling its rough texture. Suddenly, he was hit with a wave of emotions, grief, longing, and an inexplicable urge to understand. In that moment, Jake realized that he wasn't just drawn to Sophie. He felt her struggles, her hopes, and the silence that surrounded her story. Determined to learn more, he began to dig into Sophie's life. He spent hours searching through old newspapers and town records, piecing together fragments of her past. Each article told a different story about a girl who cared deeply for her community. She organized food drives, taught children how to read, and even started a small garden to help families in need. The more he learned, the more he felt connected to her spirit, but the circumstances of her disappearance remained a haunting shadow. Was it truly an accident, or had someone taken her away? Jake found himself asking these questions daily, unable to shake the belief that she had somehow reached out from the past. One sleepless night, he stumbled upon a piece of information that felt like both a clue and a warning. There were whispers of a place in those same woods where Sophie was last seen. It was an old cabin, abandoned and forgotten. According to local lore, it was said to be a place of secrets, where the earth held stories buried deep within. The next morning, with the sun barely peeking over the horizon, Jake felt a pull stronger than ever. He drove to the woods, heart pounding and palms sweaty. As he parked the car, the trees loomed overhead, casting long shadows down the trails. He took a deep breath, feeling both excited and terrified. Every step felt like stepping into the unknown. The forest was alive with rustling leaves and distant bird calls, but all he could hear was the sound of his own heart. Following an old path covered in leaves and branches, his instincts guided him deeper. The air thickened and the silence grew more profound. If something awaited him, it was here. Finally, he stumbled upon a clearing. In the middle stood the old cabin, walls worn down and windows broken. It was the kind of place that seemed to hold a lifetime of secrets. Jake approached cautiously, heart racing. The door creaked as he pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior filled with cobwebs and shadow. As he scanned the room, his eyes froze on something lying on the floor. A small wooden box, simple but beautiful. Kneeling down, he picked it up, feeling its weight in his hands. As he opened it, he discovered old letters, photographs, and the small remnants of a life once lived. It was Sophie's, and in that moment, tears filled his eyes. Each letter was a piece of her story, a recounting of dreams, fears, and love for her community. But one letter caught his breath. In it, she wrote about feeling trapped, suffocated by expectations. She longed for freedom, a life outside the town's narrow view. Jake realized that this wasn't just about Sophie anymore. It was about anyone who had ever felt stuck, lost in the expectations of others. At that moment, he felt an overwhelming desire to share her story. She had been lost, but she deserved to be remembered. He rushed back to town, filled with purpose. He reached out to the local community center, and over the next few weeks, Jake worked hard to organize a gathering. The day finally came. In the same warehouse where he had first discovered Sophie's face, he set up a small display with the letters and photographs. As people walked in, there were murmurs of surprise and recognition. Faces lightened when they recognized Sophie's name. Old friends shared memories, while younger generations listened wide-eyed. They laughed and cried together, and for the first time in years, Sophie was felt by everyone in that room, not just a face on the wall, but a spirit alive in their town. As the event came to a close, Jake took a moment to reflect. Sophie's story transformed from a ghostly whisper into a chorus of love and community. They had given life back to a young woman who had spent too long hidden in shadows. Standing before the mural once more, Jake felt the warmth of all those gathered pulse through him. Sophie wasn't just a forgotten face, she was an echo of dreams, and he was glad to bring her story into the light. And every time he passed the mural now, the eyes didn't just watch, they sparkled with joy. In that old warehouse, surrounded by the warmth of shared humanity, Jake finally understood that some faces carry stories that refuse to be forgotten. It was a nondescript Thursday afternoon when Jake felt the world shift under his feet. He was in an old storage warehouse on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where the sunlight barely made it through grimy windows, casting long shadows on the dusty floor. As he lugged another box filled with who knows what, his mind drifted into the rhythm of the day. They all started to blend together in the rush of work. But today, something unusual hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and electric. He was just about to stack another box when a strange sound echoed through the warehouse. It wasn't the usual creaking of old wood or the distant hum of traffic. No, this was a soft rustling, almost like whispers. He paused and looked around, heart racing, wondering if he was just imagining things. That's when he spotted a flicker of color on the wall at the far end. His curiosity piqued, he approached it cautiously. As he got closer, he realized it wasn't just a flicker, it was a mural, worn and faded, but unmistakably a face. Beneath layers of dust and peeling paint, Jake could make out soft features, the eyes hauntingly familiar. His breath caught in his throat as the image seemed to come alive under his gaze. This wasn't just any face, it felt intimate, almost mirror-like. But how could that be? The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than a random mural. There was a story behind this face. It was like a riddle begging to be solved. Who was she? Why was her image trapped on this wall, hidden away from the world? Shaking off the unease, Jake returned to his routine, but the image lingered in his mind like a melody that won't leave your head. Each time he returned to the warehouse, his curiosity deepened. The face had begun to haunt him, pulling at a thread in his memory he couldn't quite untangle. It wasn't until the next day, while taking a break, that he decided to talk to Gary, his supervisor. Gary, Jake began, wiping the sweat from his brow. What do you know about that old mural in the back? Gary shrugged without looking up from his clipboard. Just some old painting, been here forever. Jake felt a rush of frustration, but it feels important. Gary finally glanced up, his eyes narrowing as if he was weighing Jake's curiosity against the dull routine they both shared. If it matters to you that much, maybe talk to Mrs. Hargrove. She's been around forever. The name struck a chord. Mrs. Hargrove was a local legend, a woman whose laughter could fill a room but whose stories could chill your bones. Intrigued and a little apprehensive, Jake decided he would visit her. That afternoon, as the sun dipped lower in the sky, he drove to her quaint little cottage. Flowers spilled from every corner and the air was sweet with their scent. As he knocked on her door, he felt like a kid again, stepping into a world that was both familiar and strange. Mrs. Hargrove answered with a warm smile that made him feel immediately at ease. "Jake, what a surprise," she said, waving him in. They settled on her sun-soaked porch, the weight of generations pressing down in the air as if the walls themselves held memories. "I saw that mural at the warehouse. I need to know about it," Jake said, unable to hold back. Her eyes darkened for a moment. "Ah, yes," and just like that, the name felt heavy. "Tell me about her," Jake urged, leaning forward. The world outside melted away as Mrs. Hargrove began unraveling the story. Sophie was a beacon of light in this town, charismatic, compassionate, always helping others, she began, her voice a mix of pride and sorrow. But then one day she vanished, no one knew why or how. Jake listened enraptured. What do you mean vanished? Mrs. Hargrove shook her head, her expression solemn. Some say she ran away, others think something tragic happened. His mind raced. A brilliant woman disappearing into thin air. Why had he never heard about her before? Were people afraid to speak her name? The ghost of Sophie weighed heavy on his heart, drawing parallels with his own life, dreams lost, hopes delayed. Realizing he had to do more than just listen, Jake decided he would unearth Sophie's story. For the next few days, he buried himself in research. He scoured every newspaper article, every old town meeting record. He uncovered stories of her kindness, her ambitions, her laughter, each detail bringing Sophie more to life in his imagination. But with every page he turned, the circumstances of her disappearance loomed larger, like a shadow growing ever darker. One stormy evening, when the rain fell like a curtain, he stumbled across a mention of a forgotten cabin deep in the woods, rumored to be the last place she was seen before she disappeared. His pulse quickened. Could it be that simple? Could this place hold the key to unlocking the mystery? Before he realized it, he found himself in his car, the headlights slicing through the forest's darkness. Every rustle in the trees felt amplified, every shadow a lurking dread. But he pressed on, determination fueling his every move. The deeper he drove, the more isolated he felt, as if the universe itself was conspiring to keep secrets hidden. Finally, he spotted a clearing. There it was, the cabin, weathered and forgotten, much like Sophie herself. Heart pounding, he stepped out and approached it cautiously. The door creaked open, revealing the darkness inside, cold, quiet, and filled with secrets. Inside, Jake felt a chill race down his spine, as if the cabin itself held its breath, waiting for him to uncover what lay within. Dust motes danced in the small amount of light seeping through the cracked windows. He could almost hear the echoes of laughter once shared in this space, the warmth of life now only a memory. In one corner, he spotted a small wooden box, half hidden behind a rotting beam. As he picked it up, he felt an overwhelming sense of reverence. This box, small yet significant, felt charged with sorrow and longing. It was a piece of Sophie's story he had to explore. With trembling hands, he pried it open. Inside, he found letters, delicate and yellowed with age. Each one breathed life into Sophie's dreams, her struggles, and the loneliness she faced. Her handwriting flowed like poetry, and with every sentence, Jake felt as if he were stepping into her world. But one letter made his heart stop. It detailed a friendship Sophie had with another woman, someone rumored to have left town years ago. The last line spoke of a plan to escape, to find freedom, but it was unfinished, leaving Jake with an unbearable sense of anticipation. What had happened to Sophie? Where had she gone? At that moment, he realized Sophie wasn't just a character in a forgotten story. She was a beacon of hope for anyone feeling trapped, a reminder that each of us carries our own silent battles. Fueled by an urgent need to make sure her voice was heard, Jake organized a gathering at the warehouse. He reached out to the community, sharing bits of Sophie's story, urging them to remember her. That night, he transformed the warehouse into a tribute, bringing together every corner of the town that had once known her light. As people filtered in, Jake felt a surge of emotion washing over him. Faces flickered with recognition, and eyes widened as stories surfaced, not just about Sophie, but about their own struggles, dreams, and regrets. The air buzzed with forgotten connections and rekindled memories. He stood in front of the mural, feeling both small and empowered, ready to share everything he had uncovered. As he spoke, he could see the transformation in the crowd, the way they leaned in, hung on his every word, and how their hearts opened as Sophie's story unfolded. "I never met her, but in searching for her, I discovered a part of myself," he said, his voice steady and filled with conviction. She wasn't just a ghost on a wall. Tears flowed freely as connections formed, joy mixing with sorrow. They shared stories of resilience, laughter mingled with heartfelt tears, and the past became a present moment of unity. In that old warehouse, as night fell and the world outside faded away, Jake knew they had honored Sophie in the best way possible. They had connected through the haunting truth that our stories woven and shared are what keep us alive. And standing there, looking at the mural one last time, Jake understood that he was no longer just a guy moving boxes. He was part of something greater, a tapestry of stories that demanded to be told, the whispers on the wall finally finding their voice. He felt Sophie's presence with him, strong and vibrant. In the quiet aftermath of the gathering, he silently vowed to carry her legacy forward, not just for himself, but for everyone who felt lost and unheard in the shadows. He was just another day laborer, lifting and hauling boxes in a forgotten warehouse on the edge of town. The building was old, the kind of place where dust danced in beams of weak sunlight. As Jake hoisted another heavy crate, the weariness of routine blanketed him like a heavy fog. It was mundane, he was just doing his job, moving items from one end to the other. But on this day, that fog would lift, exposing a reality that lurked beneath the surface. Jake paused for a moment, wiping sweat from his brow. He glanced around the dimly lit space, the silence almost oppressive. That's when he noticed it, a flash of color creeping out from behind a stack of boxes at the back wall. Intrigued, he set the crate down and moved closer. He pushed aside the boxes, and there it was, a mural partially hidden, aged and peeling. It depicted a face, a woman, her expression enigmatic, her eyes filled with a haunting intensity. Jake blinked, taken aback. There was something eerily familiar about her features, a sense of recognition that sent a shiver down his spine. How could a face painted on a wall feel so real, so connected to him? He shook his head, trying to dispel the strange mix of emotions swirling inside him. It was just paint, right? But as he returned to his work, the image lingered in his mind. Who was she? Why was she on this wall, forgotten in a dusty old warehouse? Questions pulsed through Jake like an unrelenting heartbeat, drawing him back to that mural again and again. Days turned into weeks as he continued his shifts, but his fascination with the mural grew stronger. Each day, he spent a few extra moments staring at her, searching for clues in those painted eyes. They seemed to watch him, revealing a story he was dying to uncover. He wasn't an artist or a historian, but he felt a deep craving to know more. Maybe it was the psychological yearning to connect with a stranger who felt like a kindred spirit. Finally, one evening, with the sun casting long shadows, he decided to ask his supervisor, Gary. The two had shared the same grueling shifts for months, yet Jake had never broached the subject of the mural. Now, standing in front of Gary's office, he felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. Gary looked up, eyebrows raised. The one with the woman, just some old thing from when the warehouse first opened. Jake pressed, trying to convey the depth of his curiosity. Gary shrugged, a faint smile playing on his lips. If it matters that much to you, maybe try talking to Mrs. Hargrove. Mrs. Hargrove, the name resonated with the echoes of his childhood, a woman noted for her captivating stories and village gossip. He remembered nights as a kid, gathered at her home, hanging on her every word. He decided it was time to pay her a visit. The next day, under a clear blue sky, Jake found himself standing in front of her cottage. The flowers in her garden bloomed brilliantly, but the real treasure lay inside her house, the warmth of endless tales. When he knocked, Mrs. Hargrove opened the door, her eyes lighting up as she recognized him. "Jake, it's been ages. Come in," she said, ushering him inside. Seated at her kitchen table, surrounded by the comforting scent of baked goods, Jake took a deep breath. "I want to know about the mural at the warehouse." Mrs. Hargrove's smile faded, replaced by a look of understanding mixed with melancholy. "Ah, yes," the name felt electric, sending shocks through Jake's veins. "Sophie?" asked, leaning forward, the urgency palpable in his voice. Mrs. Hargrove's eyes misted over as she delved into the past. Sophie was a radiant soul, always giving and always smiling. She helped everyone in the town, volunteering at the school, the hospital. But then one day she vanished. Jake's heart raced. Vanished. People said she might have gone into the woods near her house. The town searched for weeks, but they found nothing. Some believe she ran away, caught in the throes of finding herself. Others think something sinister happened. A chill gripped Jake as he processed the information. Sophie hadn't just faded from the wall, she had faded from life, leaving questions hanging in the air like stubborn ghosts. Why hadn't anyone talked about her? She was a woman who mattered. A woman who had touched lives, including his own, in some mysterious way. The conversation lingered in his mind as he returned to the warehouse, the mural now feeling like a haunting presence. Each day, the eyes of the painted woman seemed to call him, urging him to learn more. One evening, he found himself staring at the mural, feeling caught in a web of longing and intrigue. It was more than a face, it was a piece of history yearning to be unearthed. Jake's restlessness grew, and he discovered an unexpected, passionate desire not just to find out about Sophie, but to tell her story. Armed with new determination, he began digging deeper. He researched town records, scoured library archives, and interviewed townsfolk who might hold memories of Sophie. He learned about her laugh, her compassion, and how she had poured her life into others. One woman recalled playing with Sophie as a child, her bright spirit lighting up the neighborhood. But the more he learned, the heavier the mystery became. The details of her disappearance tortured him. Then, late one rainy night, he stumbled upon an old police report buried in the archives. It detailed her last known whereabouts, a cabin in the woods. It was close to where she lived, a place rumored to hold secrets. Jake's heart raced. Could this be the key to uncovering the truth behind Sophie's fate? Without hesitation, he made plans to visit the cabin. The next day, under a blanket of gray clouds, he drove out of town, the road winding toward a forest that loomed like a guardian keeping secrets. With every mile, he felt both fear and anticipation coiling inside him. As he parked and stepped into the woods, the air thickened, heavy with the scent of damp earth. He could hear the rustle of leaves and the distant echo of birds. With each step deeper into the woods, Jake felt the weight of countless stories, lost dreams, whispered secrets, and echoes of laughter. Finally, he found the cabin standing solitary and forgotten. The exterior was weathered, but it held a strange beauty, almost as if nature had claimed it back. Heart-pounding, Jake approached, feeling the pull of both history and intrigue. Inside, the air was stale, yet a flicker of warmth permeated his being. Dust motes floated through the narrow shafts of light. As he explored, his gaze landed on a small box partly hidden beneath a floorboard. He knelt down and tugged at it, revealing its contents, a collection of letters, fading but still legible. Jake's fingers trembled as he carefully opened one of the letters. They were addressed to Sophie, filled with dreams and hopes, all penned by friends who had seen her as a guiding light. Each word, each line, evoked the spirit of someone who yearned for connection. But there was an unsettling letter that caught his eye. Of plans to leave, escape from the suffocating expectations embedded in the town. It was like holding a piece of her soul. Jake felt tears prick his eyes as he realized that Sophie had felt trapped, weighed down by the same expectations that haunted him. He returned to the warehouse, charged with newfound energy and purpose. This wasn't just a story about a lost woman. It was a call to the living, a reminder that everyone held dreams and fears, often hidden behind painted walls of silence. That evening, he organized a community gathering at the warehouse, determined to bring Sophie's story into the light. Using the letters he discovered, he created a presentation that told of her laughter, her kindness, and her search for freedom. As the news spread, the townsfolk began to trickle in, their faces curious yet puzzled. Jake stood before the mural, a deep breath filling his lungs. "Friends," he began, his voice steady yet electric. "Today we reclaim the story of Sophie." He shared her journey, and as he spoke, the atmosphere shifted. Tears shimmered in the eyes of those who remembered Sophie. Nods of understanding rippled through the crowd. Faces glimmered with memories, how she had taught them to stand up for their dreams, how she had cared for them when they faltered. As he recounted her search for freedom, he felt the weight of the crowd's shared memories engulfing him. These were not just strangers, they were fragments of a community that had, until now, lived in shadows. "I found Sophie's letters," Jake continued. "Her dreams mirror our own. We've all felt trapped at some point, restrained by what others expect, but her story teaches us that we can choose freedom." In that moment, something shifted. Sophie's story wasn't just hers, it resonated in each one of them. It sparked conversations, rekindled compassion, and opened hearts. As laughter intertwined with tears, Jake felt the warmth of connection drown the darkness that had once stifled them. People began to share their own stories of loss, of dreams deferred, and of finding courage to leap into the unknown. As the evening unfolded, the mural behind him glowed with a vibrancy it had lost for so long. It was no longer just a face, it was a celebration of resilience, a testament to the power of community and remembrance. As the gathering began to disperse, Jake lingered, mesmerized by the mural. He could have sworn the woman's eyes sparkled with gratitude. Somewhere in that faded paint, Sophie was no longer lost. She had woven herself into the very fabric of the town's spirit, a reminder that we are all connected in our struggles and dreams. With renewed resolve, Jake left the warehouse, knowing he'd not only honored Sophie but also carved a path for others to embrace their own stories. That night, as he drove back, the moon hung low in the sky, brightening the road ahead. The mural had transformed the man in that warehouse, and in doing so, rekindled a spark in an entire community. In their hearts, Sophie was home again. He was halfway through another long shift, lugging heavy boxes in an old, dingy warehouse when the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Sunlight filtered through the cracked windows, illuminating dust motes that floated lazily in the air. Jake was used to this routine, lifting, hauling, stacking. The rhythm had become almost meditative, but today felt different. Today, something was about to shake his world awake. He had just placed a box on a weary shelf when a strange sound caught his attention, a soft rustling, almost a whisper echoing from the far end of the warehouse. He paused, the box still in his hands. Curiosity tugged at him. What could it be? Setting the box down, he walked cautiously toward the source of the sound, his footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. As he rounded a corner, he froze. There on the wall, partially obscured by neglect, was a mural. Bright colors had faded into murky shades, but the outlines were unmistakable. A woman's face stared back at him, painted with a soulful intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. The moment felt surreal, like stepping into a dream. Jake's breath hitched. There was something hauntingly familiar about her features, her eyes seeming to gaze directly into his soul. But how could that be? He could almost hear the whisper of a name in his mind, but he dismissed it, shaking his head. It was just a mural, right? But as he walked away, the image of that face lingered, refusing to leave him. Who was she? Why was she here, trapped in this forgotten warehouse? The questions gnawed at him, pulling him into a hole of curiosity that felt larger than himself. Days turned into weeks, and every day he found himself drawn back to that wall. Each time he passed, it felt as if the woman were beckoning him closer, urging him to uncover her story. Instead of focusing on his work, Jake would often pause, heart racing, searching for clues in those painted eyes. He began to feel an odd connection to her, like she was woven into the fabric of his own life in some hidden way. Unbeknownst to him, the art was a piece of history, buried beneath layers of dust and time. He had yet to learn that she once had dreams, hopes, and a life that mattered, a life that had been overshadowed by silence and forgetfulness. Finally, one fateful evening, Jake couldn't contain his curiosity anymore. He decided to talk to Gary, his supervisor, who had worked at the warehouse longer than anyone could remember. Gary was gruff and often indifferent, but perhaps he knew something. "Hey Gary," Jake began, leaning against the doorframe of the small office. "What do you know about that mural in the back?" Gary raised an eyebrow, giving him a quizzical look. "That old thing, just some artwork from way back when the warehouse first opened." "That can't be all there is to it," Jake pressed, determination creeping into his voice. Gary shrugged, an amused smirk tugging at his lips. "If it's that important to you, ask Mrs. Hargrove." Jake felt a spark of hope. Mrs. Hargrove was a local legend, a woman filled with tales that seemed to ebb and flow like the tides of time. He decided he would visit her the next day. The morning sun was bright as he made his way to her quaint cottage, an anchor of warmth and nostalgia in the town. Flowers bloomed vibrantly in her garden, and the air danced with the sweet scent of blossoms. Knocking on her door, Jake felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness, like he was about to unlock a hidden treasure. "Jake," she exclaimed, her eyes twinkling. She ushered him inside, the aroma of freshly baked cookies welcoming him like a warm hug. Once settled at her kitchen table, he took a deep breath. "I need to know about the mural in the warehouse." Mrs. Hargrove's smile tightened, her eyes clouding with thought. "Ah yes," the name sent a jolt through him. "Sophie," her voice softened, tinged with sadness. Sophie was a beautiful spirit, always ready to help others. She was the lifeblood of this community, organizing events, volunteering at the school. But one day she simply vanished. His heart raced. Mrs. Hargrove sighed, her fingers tracing the edges of an old quilt on the table. People searched for weeks. Some believed she ran away, seeking a life beyond what this town had to offer. Others, a chill crept over Jake, as if the shadows of the room had extended to wrap around his heart. How could someone so vibrant simply disappear, and why had the town forgotten her? "I've spent my whole life here, and I've barely heard her name," he whispered, awareness dawning on him. "It's complicated," she replied, her voice heavy. "People don't like to talk about loss." Jake felt a surge of determination wash over him. He couldn't let Sophie remain a ghost lost to time. As he returned to the warehouse, the weight of her story felt like an anchor pulling him into the depths of his own unresolved feelings about life and dreams. He had to find out more, even if it meant digging deep into a painful past he had no idea he was connected to. He spent the next few weeks investigating, uncovering fragments of Sophie's life. Old newspapers revealed articles about her charitable actions, how she'd helped families in crisis, organized community events, and even taught kids how to read. With each piece of information, he felt her spirit more vividly, but the haunting question of her disappearance hung over him. Late one rainy night, while thousands of thoughts buzzed in his mind, Jake stumbled upon an article buried in an old archive. The last known sighting of Sophie mentioned one place, the woods, specifically a small, abandoned cabin. A rush of adrenaline surged through him. Could this be where she had gone? He felt the air around him grow thick with anticipation, like standing at the edge of an untold story. Without hesitation, Jake decided he would seek out the cabin. The very next day he drove out of town, the trees on either side looming like guardians of untold secrets. With every mile he felt a mixture of excitement and dread, each pulse of uncertainty sending a shiver down his spine. He was headed towards the unknown, searching for answers he hoped would finally let Sophie's spirit rest. Arriving at the woods, he parked and stepped into the earthy scent of damp leaves and moss. Shadows flickered as he walked deeper into the forest, each step a silent plea for discovery. Then he caught sight of it, the cabin, a relic of the past, standing lonely and silent. It looked every bit as forgotten as Sophie had been. With trepidation, Jake approached, a sense of reverence washing over him. The broken door creaked as he pulled it open, revealing an interior filled with dust and memories. He took a deep breath, stepping inside, feeling time stand still. A beam of sunlight cut through the darkness, illuminating what once was a place alive with laughter and stories. As he explored, his eyes landed on a weathered box in a corner, partially hidden behind a broken beam. The moment he touched it, Jake felt a jolt, as if connecting with something far greater than himself. He carefully pried it open, revealing a collection of letters, crumpled and stained by age. Each letter spoke of dreams, hopes, and a longing for freedom. They were deeply personal, revealing her struggles with town expectations and her yearning for something more. One letter struck him like lightning. It detailed plans for escape, urging someone to remember her not with tears but with hope. It echoed in his heart, an anthem of dreams deferred, a plea for understanding. Jake's eyes began to sting with unshed tears. Sophie hadn't simply vanished, she had been battling her own demons. Her story, wrapped in layers of pain and yearning, connected with his own life in ways he hadn't anticipated. For too long he had followed the rules, buried his dreams under layers of obligation. Today that would change. He left the cabin, heart pounding with purpose. It was time to return to the warehouse, to share Sophie's story, to give her the voice she deserved. He spent the next few days preparing a gathering, reaching out to the townspeople, igniting a spark of urgency in the air. This wasn't merely about memory, it was about connection, understanding, and learning to embrace shared struggles. The night of the gathering arrived, and the warehouse buzzed with energy as people filtered in, curious faces illuminated by the glow of hanging lights. Jake stood in front of the mural. The once hidden image now felt vibrant and alive, ready to tell the story it had guarded for so long. As the crowd settled, he began, "Thank you all for coming tonight. We're here to remember Sophie, a woman who poured her heart into this community and in return was lost to us. We need to honor her memory, her dreams, and the burdens she carried." With each word, the atmosphere shifted. Faces softened with empathy as Jake unveiled the letters he had discovered, reading them aloud. Each letter breathed life into Sophie's story, opening a door to allow everyone to step into her world. The crowd was captivated, connecting the emotions of loss, dreams, and the simple desire for freedom. As Jake spoke, he glanced at the mural. The woman's eyes seemed to glimmer with gratitude, a flicker of hope shining through the layers of paint. The audience leaned in, some wiping away tears, some nodding in understanding. They were awakening to the idea that in each of them lay unfinished stories, dreams waiting to be nurtured. As the night stretched on, sharing stories became the lifeblood of the gathering. Those who had once felt too fearful to voice their own struggles began to speak. They shared moments of heartbreak, their own battles with expectations, and the innate desire to pursue freedom. Each voice added a vibrant thread to the collective tapestry of their community, threads that felt knotted but tethered together through shared experiences. And in that moment, Jake realized that this wasn't just about Sophie anymore. It was about everyone who had ever felt lost, anyone who had yearned for something more. The mural behind him had transformed from a forgotten painting into a living testament of hope, stitched together by their shared stories. As the gathering came to a close, the weight of remembrance hung heavy in the air, but it no longer felt suffocating. It felt cathartic, liberating. They had honored Sophie together, giving her the recognition she had long deserved. Jake stepped back, taking a moment to reflect. The mural, now painted over with the colors of their shared experiences, felt like a beacon of hope. He understood then that stories possess a relentless power, the power to connect, to heal, and to awaken dreams deeply buried. He left the warehouse that night with a heart full of gratitude, knowing he had not only reconnected a community with its past, but also freed every soul to hold their dreams tighter, to step boldly into the future. He carried Sophie's spirit with him, a reminder that even in the shadows, the light of shared stories could shine through, illuminating paths true to the heart. And as he walked into the night, Jake felt a sense of peace wrap around him like an embrace from an old friend. The mural was no longer just a face on the wall. It was Sophie's legacy, a story that would live on, inspiring generations to come. He was carrying boxes in a forgotten warehouse when everything fell into place. The air was thick with dust, and the faint light cutting through grimy windows danced like ghosts across the floor. Jake had spent countless hours moving these boxes, his muscles aching under the weight, yet today felt different. Something lingered in the silence, something that sent shivers of anticipation down his spine. As he hoisted another heavy crate, he caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned to see a section of the wall hidden behind a stack of boxes. Was that color? Curiosity ignited, Jake set down the box and picked his way through the clutter, heart pounding with eagerness. He pushed aside debris, squinting to see clearly. There it was, a mural revealing a woman's face, vibrant yet faded. Her eyes seemed to glimmer with a story, pulling him in, captivating him. He felt the breath catch in his throat. This wasn't just paint, it was a portal into another world, one that intertwined with his own in an inexplicable way. Who was she? Jake stepped back, shaking his head in disbelief. It's just a mural, he muttered, trying to rationalize it. But the woman's face lingered in his mind, refusing to be dismissed. What did it mean? Why was she here, hidden in this forgotten corner of the warehouse? Days passed, but the image kept burning in his brain. Every time he returned to lift boxes, he stole glances at her, feeling a strange bond grow between them. The weight of the mural felt heavy, almost as if it carried a message meant only for him. Jake was no artist, but he found himself daydreaming about her life, who she was, and what brought her to this desolate place. Finally, curiosity conquered reason. One afternoon, after stowing away yet another load, he decided it was time to find answers. He walked over to Gary, his supervisor, who was sprawled on a stool in the break room, sipping coffee as if the world had slowed around him. "Hey, Gary," Jake began, his voice steady yet uncertain. "Do you know anything about that mural in the back?" Gary looked up, perplexed. "The painting, sure, it's just an old thing. No one really knows who she is anymore." "I don't know," Jake admitted. "It feels important. I mean, she's just there. Maybe you should ask Mrs. Hargrove." Jake held on to the suggestion, feeling excited yet anxious. Mrs. Hargrove was a local legend, known for her rich storytelling. She had seen the town grow and change, and her knowledge felt like a hidden treasure. The next afternoon, Jake found himself standing in front of her cottage, nestled among blooming flowers. The scent of lilacs swirled around him as he knocked on her door. She opened it with a warm smile that made the years melt away. She exclaimed, enveloping him in a hug that felt like home. "Mrs. Hargrove, I need to ask you about the mural in the warehouse." Her eyes flickered for a moment, clouded with memories. Ah yes, Sophie. Jake felt a rush of adrenaline. Sophie. Mrs. Hargrove took a deep breath, a mixture of pride and sadness crossing her face. Sophie was the heart of our community. She was bright, full of life, always helping others, but one day she disappeared. His heart raced, disappeared just like that. She shook her head, eyes distant. People searched for weeks. Some say she ran away, that she couldn't take it anymore. Jake could feel the air grow heavier with the weight of her story, its echoes resonating deep within him. Why was Sophie's legacy buried under neglect? The thought stirred something in him, awakening a fire he didn't know he had. He had to uncover her story, not just for her sake, but for himself. As he walked back to the warehouse, purpose ignited within him. He spent the following weeks researching, digging up old archives and newspaper clippings. Every article painted a picture of a vibrant woman who had dedicated herself to others, teaching kids, organizing community events, lifting spirits. The more he learned, the more intrigued he became. But the mystery of her disappearance loomed like a dark cloud, a charade he felt drawn to unravel. Late one night, poring over historical records in the dim light of his apartment, he stumbled upon an obscure mention of a cabin deep in the woods rumored to be the last place Sophie was seen. Gossips and whispers framed it as a site of secrets buried in the forest's depths. Jake felt a rush of excitement. Could this cabin hold the key to unlocking Sophie's fate? With a mixture of fear and exhilaration, he decided to take action. The very next day, he packed a bag and drove to the woods, the trees closing in around him like sentinels watching his every move. As he parked his car and stepped into the damp, cool air, tension tingled along his spine. He could hear the rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds, but his heart thudded loud enough for him to sense it deep in his chest. Clutching a flashlight, he ventured deeper into the forest, breath hitching with each step. Finally, he found it, the cabin. It stood less sturdy than before, worn and forgotten, yet there was a strange beauty about it. He approached cautiously, his fingertips tingling with anticipation. What had happened here? Pushing the door open, it creaked in protest, unveiling a dusty interior filled with shadows. It smelled of damp wood and time long past. The beam of his flashlight flickered against the walls, revealing scribbles and scratches, memories trapped within the wood. As he stepped further inside, a small box caught his eye, tucked in a corner as if waiting for him. Jake hurried to it, his heart pounding. He carefully pried it open, revealing letters, some torn and stained, written in a hurried, familiar script. They were addressed to Sophie. Aunties, friends, and fellow townsfolk poured their hearts into these faded pages, recalling her laughter, her kindness, and her impact on the community. And then he stumbled upon one letter that gripped him entirely. Its tone was different, filled with longing. It spoke of a desire to escape, to feel alive outside the constraints of small-town expectations. If you ever find this, remember me not with sadness but with freedom, it read, chilling him to the marrow. His chest tightened. Sophie hadn't just vanished, she had felt trapped, suffocated by the very people she had sought to uplift. It mirrored feelings he had faced himself, dreams stifled by monotony, hopes buried beneath layers of routine. He realized he had been carrying his own boxes, weighed down by expectations. Fueled by a newfound purpose, Jake decided it was time to share Sophie's story with the community. The next evening, he organized a gathering at the warehouse. He spread the word, feeling an urgency in the air. He wanted everyone to know who Sophie was, not just a face on the wall, but a woman full of life and dreams. As the town gathered in the warehouse, he stood in front of the mural, its colors muted yet powerful. He glanced around the room, taking in familiar faces filled with curiosity, confusion, and a yearning to connect. He started speaking, his voice steady but charged with emotion. As he shared the letters he discovered, voices in the room began to soften, faces reflecting feelings of bittersweet nostalgia. People nodded, memories igniting and tears glistening in their eyes. The emotional atmosphere intensified, drawing everyone closer together. He read the letter about freedom and the impact was palpable. Jake continued, feeling the room sway with connection. In that moment, buried stories stirred like a storm. The walls of the warehouse reverberated with whispers of people who had also felt the weight of responsibilities and expectations. One by one, they began to share their truths, moments of despair, dreams sacrificed for obligation. The air crackled with catharsis and the sharing of burdens, revealing how they were all interconnected through similar struggles. Jake glanced at the mural and for the first time it felt alive. Sophie's eyes sparkled as if resonating with the transformation taking place. She represented hope, a reflection of their aspirations, a reminder that they could choose to break free. As the gathering progressed, they forged connections through shared pain, laughter, and the collective expression of hope. People shared stories of watching Sophie in her element, how she had inspired them, how they had allowed her bravery to influence their own lives. The atmosphere surged with solidarity, healing old wounds and celebrating a collective spirit. As the evening drew to a close, there was a palpable sense of relief. The weight of remembrance had shifted from a burden to a celebration. They had reclaimed Sophie together, and the fabric of their community felt stronger, more connected. Jake stepped outside to breathe in the crisp night air, feeling eternally grateful. Sophie's mural behind him radiated warmth as if it too had transformed. No longer just a face on the wall, it was a tapestry of many lives woven together with threads of resilience, hope, and shared experiences. In his heart, Jake knew that Sophie would never truly be lost. In retelling her story, he had unearthed something within himself, a buried longing he had often ignored. He wasn't just a guy moving boxes anymore. He was a keeper of stories, someone committed to honoring not only Sophie but everyone who had ever felt trapped by life circumstances. As he walked away, the night sky adorned with stars reminded him that they were all guiding lights, illuminating paths to dreams within reach. He felt Sophie's spirit with him now, alive and vibrant. She was home again, resting within the hearts of everyone she touched. And in that moment, he realized the power of connection, understanding, and encouraged forces strong enough to transcend time, allowing dreams to take flight once more. He was carrying boxes in the dim light of an old warehouse when everything changed. The warehouse was a forgotten relic at the edge of town, with dusty shelves stacked high and shadows creeping through the corners. Jake was used to the work. He had been doing it for years, moving boxes filled with everything from long-lost furniture to dusty memorabilia. Each box held a memory, a story, but he had never stopped to wonder about them. That day, as he lifted another heavy box, a flash of something caught his eye. He paused, squinting into the murky light. There was a canvas peeking out from behind piles of debris stacked high against the wall. Hesitating for a moment, he set the box down and walked closer. Dust motes danced in the air as he pushed aside the clutter, revealing an old painting that had been long forgotten. Jake's breath hitched as he stepped back to take it all in. The bright colors had faded over time, but the image stared back at him with a haunting familiarity. It was a portrait of a woman, her expression serene yet filled with emotion. He felt a jolt at the sight of her face. Something about her eyes seemed alive, as if she held a story that was aching to be told. He had seen the face before somewhere, in a dream or a fleeting memory. The woman looked back at him, her gaze penetrated his thoughts like a whisper from the past. He shook the sensation off, convinced it was just his imagination. After all, how could a painting stir feelings so deep? But as he turned away, the image followed him, lingering in his mind. Jake had always been a man of boxes and forgotten things, but this moment had thrown his reality into chaos. Who was she? What was her story? The days that followed turned into a blur, but every single shift brought him back to that mural. He moved boxes, yet his heart raced every time he caught a glimpse of her. He felt an inexplicable bond to the painting, one that began to consume his thoughts. The weight of her gaze pressed on him, compelling him to discover who she really was. One afternoon, while sorting through a stack of crates, he decided enough was enough. He needed to talk to someone who might know more about the mural. "Hey Gary," he called out, spotting his supervisor standing by the entrance, sipping coffee. "You ever notice that painting in the back?" Gary raised an eyebrow, surprised. "That old thing, been there for ages." "Nobody knows who she is," Jake pressed, his curiosity bubbling to the surface. Gary shrugged, scratching his beard thoughtfully. "If it means that much to you, go ask Mrs. Hargrove." Jake nodded, feeling a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. Mrs. Hargrove was a legend in the town, a storyteller whose tales wrapped themselves around generations like ivy on old brick. If anyone knew about the mural, it would be her. The following day, the sun glinted off the windows as Jake made his way to her quaint little cottage, with its flower-laden garden spilling over with color. He felt both nervous and excited as he knocked on the weathered door. When it swung open, he was greeted by a warm smile, a window into a past filled with stories and laughter. "Jake," Mrs. Hargrove exclaimed, inviting him in. She ushered him into her cozy living room, which was filled with mementos and photographs. It smelled sweet, enveloping him like a warm hug. "I need to know about the mural in the warehouse," he began, feeling the urgency of his question. Her expression shifted as though she were recalling a cherished memory. "Ah yes, Sophie." Jake leaned forward, intrigued. Mrs. Hargrove's brow furrowed. Sophie was the heart of this town. She organized events, taught children, and cared deeply for everyone. But then, one day she vanished. Jake felt the words send a jolt through him. What was that? "No," Mrs. Hargrove continued, her voice tinted with sorrow. "People searched everywhere. Some believe she ran away to escape, while others think something dreadful might have happened." Jake could feel the enormity of her story flooding his thoughts. Sophie wasn't just an image on a wall, she was a life that mattered, a woman whose absence created an echo throughout the community. As he left Mrs. Hargrove's cottage, a resolve began to crystallize inside him. He had to learn everything he could about Sophie, her dreams, her fears, and ultimately her disappearance. That night, Jake sat down with a stack of old newspapers he had found in the library. Page after page revealed glimpses of Sophie's life, her charity work, her laughter, the way she brought people together. The more he read, the more he realized how deeply connected he felt to her, even though they had never met. They both lived in a world of expectations, wrapped in obligations, but each article also echoed a painful truth. The mystery of her disappearance loomed like a fog. It spoke of the woods behind the town where she was last seen. Heart-pounding, he realized it was time to take action. He had to know what had happened to her. Jake decided to visit the woods, the last known place where Sophie had been. The following morning he set out, driving with determination as clouds rolled in, darkening the sky. As he parked near the tree line, the forest appeared foreboding, branches reaching out like skeletal hands. He grabbed his flashlight, took a deep breath, and stepped into the unknown. Twilight wrapped around him as he ventured deeper into the woods, the air thick with anticipation and echoes of rustling leaves. Time felt suspended in this realm of shadows and whispers. Was it possible that Sophie had felt this uncertainty too? He pressed on, heart racing, searching for something tangible, something that might finally connect him to her. Suddenly, he stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center stood what looked like an old, dilapidated cabin. A rush of adrenaline surged through him. This had to be the place. Jake approached cautiously, the fear of what he might find battling against his desire for answers. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust. He shone his flashlight around, illuminating small remnants of a life once lived. Photographs hung crookedly on the walls, their faces blurred with age. And then his eyes fell upon something in the corner, a small wooden box, half hidden beneath a floorboard, as if it had been waiting for him. With trembling hands, he pulled it out, placing it on the floor. As he opened it, a collection of letters spilled out, some crumpled and stained with time. They were addressed to Sophie, written by friends and family, filled with words of love, encouragement, and a longing that gripped Jake's heart. But then he found one letter that sent chills up his spine. It was written in a frantic scrawl, expressing a desperate desire to break free. "I can't stay here anymore." The words echoed like a cry for help, resonating deep within him. It painted a picture of a woman torn between duty and freedom, encapsulating her struggle beautifully. Jake's chest tightened as tears pricked his eyes. Sophie hadn't simply disappeared. She had been fighting against the expectations of her life, yearning for something more just like he had. He left the cabin filled with resolve. Sophie's story needed to be told. It had to be a source of inspiration rather than a point of despair. As he drove back to the warehouse, he felt a sense of urgency and purpose burning inside him. The next evening, he organized a gathering in the very warehouse where he had first laid eyes on Sophie's face. He reached out to the community, inviting townsfolk to come together and share what they could about her. The word spread quickly, energized by curiosity and nostalgia. As the sun set, illuminating the brick walls in warm hues of orange and gold, people began to trickle in. The atmosphere buzzed with nervous energy as Jake stood by the mural, feeling the eyes of the woman in paint upon him. He cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "Thank you for coming tonight," he began, his voice steady but charged with emotion. Jake shared the stories he had uncovered, the laughter, the love, and the pain of a life filled with dreams. As he read some of the letters he had found in the cabin, emotions swelled in the room. People listened intently, some nodding as old memories resurfaced, while others fought back tears. He spoke of the letter that detailed her desire for freedom, and he felt the heat of connection radiating from the crowd. Jake urged, his voice rising with passion. As his words hung in the air, the crowd began to come alive. They shared their own stories of struggle, of dreams left behind in the shadows. One by one, they spoke of their lost aspirations and the weight of societal expectations. Relationship after relationship was unveiled, all intertwined with Sophie's story. With each story shared, the mural behind Jake seemed to glow with a vibrant light, reflecting the renewed spirit of the community. They were no longer individuals with separate burdens. They were a collective yearning for change, ready to embrace their truths. As the night stretched on, Jake felt a transformation taking place. The walls of the warehouse, once filled with neglect, were now alive with stories, laughter, and unfiltered emotion. Each voice added to the tapestry of resilience and hope, merging Sophie's legacy with their own. When the gathering finally wound down, an unexpected feeling of peace washed over Jake. The weight of remembrance had transformed from a burden into a celebration. As people began to leave, they were filled with a sense of purpose, connections revived, and dreams reignited. Stepping outside into the cool night air, Jake looked back at the warehouse, the mural glowing softly in the dark. Sophie's face no longer belonged solely to the past. It had become a symbol for everyone searching for their own lights in the darkness. As he walked home, he felt a sense of belonging he had never known before. They had woven together stories and memories, breathing life into what it meant to be human. Sophie may have been lost, but her spirit had found a way back through him, and her story would continue to resonate, lighting a path for those who dared to follow their dreams. Jake finally understood that life was about so much more than carrying boxes. It was about connections, courage, and the stories that bind them all. Sophie had shown him the way, and her spirit would forever guide him as he stepped boldly into the future, ready to embrace all the possibilities life had to offer. He was carrying boxes, lost in the rhythm of his labor, when he glanced at the wall and felt the world shift. Jake had worked in the old warehouse for years, surrounded by dusty crates and shadows that whispered stories of the past. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten memories, but today something felt different, charged, almost electric. As he lifted another box, he turned his head, and there she was, a faded mural at the far corner of the warehouse. He paused, muscles straining from exertion, as something in him awakened. The woman in the mural seemed trapped in time, her eyes looking out with an expression that was both haunting and familiar. Jake felt an inexplicable connection, a thread pulling at the fabric of his consciousness. He whispered to the mural, almost expecting a response. The artwork had been neglected, covered in a layer of grime that dulled its vibrancy, but the essence was still there. She was beautiful, a symbol of something lost, something long forgotten. Jake couldn't tear his gaze away. Why did she feel so important? The more he stared, the more he felt drawn into her story, an urge to uncover the truth behind that painted face. It was paradoxical, he had never cared much for art, yet this felt like a calling, a siren's song pulling him deeper into mystery. He could almost hear her voice urging him to discover her past. Days passed, and every time he returned to work, the mural captivated him further. He found himself sneaking extra glances, and the weight of curiosity grew heavier. He wondered who had painted her and why she had been left here to fade away in the shadows. He began to notice the subtle details, the contours of her face, the glint of light in her eyes. It felt like she was trying to tell him something. One brisk afternoon, after lifting too many boxes to count, Jake found himself standing in front of the mural again. A fire ignited within him. He had to know more. Thoughts drifted to Gary, his supervisor, the gruff but good-natured man who had seen the warehouse through its many seasons. If anyone could shed light on this mystery, it was Gary. Jake called out, wiping sweat from his brow as he dropped a crate down. "You ever see that mural in the back?" Gary looked up, shrugging as he leaned back against the crumbling wall. "You mean that old thing? Sure, it's been here forever." Jake pressed, feeling the urgency bubbling in his chest. "I mean, it seems like she's..." Gary chuckled, momentarily taken aback by Jake's enthusiasm. "If it matters that much to you, go ask Mrs. Hargrove." The mention of Mrs. Hargrove sent a wave of nostalgia through Jake. She was a local legend, known for her captivating stories and infinite wisdom. If anyone could help him unlock the mystery, it was her. That very afternoon, Jake drove to her quaint cottage. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the flower-filled garden that surrounded her home. He knocked on the door, his heart racing, the weight of his curiosity almost too much to bear. "Jake," her voice rang through the air as she opened the door, a smile spreading across her wrinkled face. "Mrs. Hargrove, I need to ask you about the mural at the warehouse." He stepped into her cozy living room, feeling the warmth envelop him like a soft blanket. She hesitated for a moment, as if wrestling with memories that were buried deep. "Ah, yes, Sophie." Jake felt a surge of interest. "Sophie." Mrs. Hargrove's expression grew somber as she settled into her chair, recalling the past. Sophie was the heart of this town. She organized events, worked in the library, and had a gift for bringing people together. But one day, she vanished without a trace. Jake felt his heart race. "No," she replied, the sadness thick in her voice. "People searched for weeks. Some believe she ran away to find freedom, while others think something more sinister happened." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Sophie was not just a painting, she was a real person, a woman whose disappearance had left a gaping hole in the community. Why had no one kept her story alive? The thought consumed him as he left Mrs. Hargrove's home, a new sense of purpose igniting inside him. As he drove back to the warehouse, he made a decision. He would find out what had happened to Sophie, not just for himself, but for her, so she would not be forgotten. He spent the next few days digging through old newspaper archives, poring over every scrap of information he could find. The more he read, the more he felt her spirit guiding him. Every article recounted her kindness, her laughter, her undying commitment to the town. But each piece left him with the same gnawing question: where had she gone? One day, he stumbled upon a mention of a cabin in the woods rumored to be the last place she was seen. His pulse quickened. Could this be the key to unlocking the mystery? Determined, he set out the very next day. The road leading to the woods twisted and turned, with shadows creeping as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Jake parked his car and stepped into the forest, heart pounding, every rustle seeming to echo his own anxiety. Each step felt heavy yet oddly liberating, as if he were walking in Sophie's footsteps. Finally, he spotted the cabin. It stood faded and forgotten, a remnant of the past cloaked in the embrace of nature. He approached cautiously, the air thick with tension. What would he find inside? He pushed open the door and it creaked in protest, revealing a darkness that held its breath. Dust danced in the light of his flashlight, illuminating remnants of a bygone era. As he stepped deeper inside, he found a small box tucked beneath a decaying floorboard. Jake knelt, his heart pounding as he pulled the box into the light. Inside lay a collection of letters, yellowed and frayed. They were addressed to Sophie, filled with tales of affection and vibrant memories. Each word seemed to breathe life into her story, transforming her from a ghost to a vibrant spirit. But then he found a letter that made his heart stop. It was scribbled hastily, expressing desperation and a longing for freedom. "I can't be trapped here anymore," it read. With each word, Jake felt the rush of emotion swell within him. Sophie hadn't just vanished, she had been fighting against the very life people expected her to lead. A deep sadness filled him, for he knew what it felt like to carry unfulfilled dreams in the shadow of obligation. Suddenly, he was filled with resolve. He couldn't let Sophie's story remain buried. She needed to be remembered, not just as a mural on a wall, but as a person who had once lived and dreamed. He grabbed the letters, cradling them like treasures, and hurried back to the town. That evening, Jake organized a gathering at the warehouse, feeling an electric urgency to share Sophie's story with the community. He reached out to nearly everyone he knew, wanting them to remember the woman who had once been their light. As the sun began to set, he prepared himself for whatever lay ahead. When the townsfolk began filtering in, a sense of anticipation buzzed in the air. Faces filled with curiosity looked upon the mural, and Jake felt the weight of a collective memory pressing against him. He cleared his throat, the moment ripe with potential. "Thank you all for being here tonight." As he spoke, he unveiled some of the letters he had found, reading snippets that captured Sophie's essence. Each word resonated within the crowd, igniting shared memories and emotions. People listened, captivated, as the walls of the warehouse filled with echoes of laughter, sadness, and a longing to remember. When Jake recounted Sophie's desire for freedom, the enormity of the moment washed over him. He asked, his heart racing, "Sophie represents those dreams." Something shifted in the atmosphere as the people around him began to stir. Slowly, stories began to flow. Faces softened as old friends opened up about their own dreams and regrets. The room became alive with voices that resonated, each story intertwined, stitching together the fabric of their shared humanity. Jake stood, watching as they connected over struggles and hopes. The mural behind him seemed to glow brighter, transforming from a mere image to a living testament. Sophie's legacy was rising from the shadows, turning pain into unity, grief into strength. As the evening unfolded, Jake felt something deep within him shift. He had honored Sophie in ways he never thought possible. Together, they had all transformed that warehouse. A space once filled with shadows and neglect had become a home for lost stories, healing, and shared dreams. Long after the last person trickled out, he remained in the dim light. The mural flickered softly as Jake absorbed what had transpired. He understood now that Sophie would never truly be forgotten. She was a part of this town, part of them all, her spirit walking amongst them as they carried her story forward. With renewed purpose, Jake stepped outside into the cool night air. The stars twinkled above him, illuminating paths of hope. Sophie's story would live on, written in the hearts of those who had once felt lost. They were now united in dreaming boldly and breaking free from the burdens of obligation. As Jake drove home, he realized the profound truth forged in the evening's struggles and revelations. Life isn't merely about carrying boxes, it's about honoring the stories that connect everyone. Sophie had shown him a way to live, to open his heart to the dreams hidden beneath the surface. In reclaiming her story, Jake had found his own. And in his heart, he knew he was no longer just a worker in a warehouse, but a keeper of stories, a seeker of truth, ready to embrace all the possibilities life had to offer. He was carrying boxes in the dim light of the old warehouse when he saw her, the woman on the wall. Jake lifted a heavy crate, muscles straining, sweat beading on his forehead. The warehouse was a maze of forgotten items, dusty shelves filled with everything from vintage furniture to broken electronics. It was the new job he had taken, the kind of work that offered little comfort but a steady paycheck. Today, however, it felt different. As he navigated through the shadows, something caught his eye, a flicker of color hidden behind a pile of boxes. He paused, curiosity gnawing at him, and set the crate down. He pushed aside the dust-laden boxes, heart racing as he uncovered the edge of a painting, a mural, vibrant yet faded, of a woman whose expression was locked in time. The moment he laid eyes on her, he felt an odd connection, as if she were staring straight into his soul. Her features were delicately painted, surrounded by swirls of color that hinted at a story behind them. He stepped closer, glimpsing the intricate details of her expression, sadness coupled with an unyielding strength. It struck a chord deep within him, stirring something he hadn't felt in a long time. He whispered, though he knew it was just paint. But the air around him crackled with tension, as if she was trying to tell him something. He shivered at the thought, but pushed it aside. Jake had never paid much attention to art or murals. He was a practical guy, focused on lifting and moving items, yet here he stood, entranced. As he turned to leave, something compelled him to look back one last time. This time, the woman's eyes seemed to follow him. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow part of a larger story, a story that he was now drawn into. For the next few days, Jake couldn't help himself. Each time he returned to the warehouse, his thoughts drifted back to the mural. He found himself sneaking glances, lost in daydreams about who she might be and why she was there. He caught himself wondering if she had been real, a woman who lived and walked like him. What had her life been like? Finally, he decided he had to know more. He looked around for someone who might have answers. His boss, Gary, had been around long enough. He might have seen or heard something. Jake called out one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow. "You know that mural in the back?" Gary turned, a bemused expression on his face. "That old thing? Sure, it's been here since the warehouse opened." Jake pressed, feeling a surge of urgency. "Some say her name is Sophie." Gary shrugged, dismissive. Jake's heart quickened. "Gossip, what do you mean?" Gary leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms. "You'd have to ask Mrs. Hargrove. She knows all the local legends." Mrs. Hargrove, the name stirred memories in Jake. She was the town's storyteller, her voice filled with wisdom and humor. He'd heard tales of her captivating stories at community gatherings. Perhaps she could shed light on this mystery. The next day, with a spring in his step, Jake drove to her cottage, nestled among blooming flowers and shaded by tall trees. Knocking on her door, he felt a rush of nostalgia, a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "Jake," she exclaimed, her face lighting up as she ushered him inside. Her living room was filled with old photographs and trinkets, each a testament to a life richly lived. The air smelled of fresh-baked cookies, wrapping him in warmth. "I came to ask you about the mural in the warehouse," he began, hesitating for a moment. "Do you know who the woman is?" Mrs. Hargrove's demeanor changed, a softness filling her eyes. "Ah, Sophie, yes, she was the heart of this town," Jake asked, leaning forward, his heart racing, her gaze turned distant. "Sophie was special. She organized school events, helped families in need, and was beloved by many." His voice barely above a whisper, heart pounding in his chest. "The town searched for weeks. Everyone was so worried," she said, her voice laced with melancholy. "Some said she went into the woods and never came back. Others insisted she was running away from something, but no one ever found proof." Something clicked inside Jake. He felt a surge of energy that matched the agitation in his heart. He had to know the truth. He couldn't let Sophie fade into obscurity. After leaving Mrs. Hargrove's cozy home, Jake found himself restless. He had to dig deeper. That night, he pored over old newspaper clippings at the library, searching for any mention of Sophie. Each article painted a portrait of a passionate woman, someone who had left a mark on her community, but each ended with the same nagging question: what happened to her? Late into the night, he stumbled upon a mention of a cabin in the woods, rumored to be the last place she was seen. His heart pounded with a mix of dread and determination. He had to go there. Maybe Sophie had left something behind, something that could explain her disappearance. The next afternoon, Jake parked his truck at the edge of the forest. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying whispers of stories untold. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything pressing on him as he stepped into the woods. With each step deeper into the forest, the weight of the world seemed to lift, replaced by an unshakable sense of purpose. Shadows danced among the trees, the sunlight filtering through the branches in a beautiful mosaic, yet a heaviness lingered in the air. It was as if Sophie's spirit was guiding him, urging him forward into the unknown. Minutes turned into what felt like hours. Finally, he found it, the cabin standing solitary among the trees, slowly being consumed by nature. He approached cautiously, heart racing as he gripped the doorknob and pulled it open. The door creaked, revealing a dark interior that felt heavy with anticipation. Inside, Jake's flashlight illuminated dust motes swirling like forgotten echoes. The scent of mildew wrapped around him. The walls were covered in old papers, memories trapped in time. Every corner held a story begging to be unleashed. As he stepped further in, his beam of light caught something on the floor, a small, locked box half submerged in dirt and debris. Jake knelt down, fingers trembling with excitement. As he pried it open, a stack of letters spilled out. His breath quickened as he sifted through them, each one holding a piece of Sophie's life. Some letters were gentle, filled with love and encouragement from friends. Others were desperate pleas for understanding, revealing the internal battles she faced. But one letter stopped him cold. Written in frantic handwriting, it conveyed urgency, a longing to escape. "If you find this, know that my heart is heavy and I cannot bear the weight of this world any longer," it read. "I have to find my own path." Jake's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. Sophie hadn't simply vanished. She had been fighting against constraints that suffocated her, longing for liberation. Good his own struggles, the invisible battles he had faced, the dreams he had pushed aside. The walls felt like they were closing in as he grappled with a tumult of emotions. What had happened to her, and why was her story buried in neglect? Suddenly he heard a noise, a rustle from outside the cabin. Startled, Jake snapped his head toward the door. Was someone else here? A chill ran down his spine. This was not the time to be caught. He couldn't let anyone take away the answers he had just uncovered. Without thinking, he shoved the letters into his backpack and turned to leave the cabin. But as he stepped outside, he saw a figure standing between the trees. Suddenly, everything froze. A familiar voice called out, and his heart sank into his stomach. It was Emily, his best friend since childhood, looking equally surprised and troubled. He stammered, trying to regain his composure. "I came looking for you. You vanished without a word, and I was worried." Her eyes darted around, filled with concern. "Stay back," Jake said, urgency in his voice. "You don't understand." Emily's brow creased. "Sophie, the woman from the mural, you shouldn't be digging into this." He scoffed, frustration bubbling over. "It's dangerous to forget. She deserves to be remembered." "Jake, please," she said gently, stepping closer. "Let's go back." Emotions clashed inside him, torn between wanting to protect his friend and needing to complete this journey. "I can't." But the moment stretched, tension lingering in the air. He could feel the weight of unanswered questions pressing down on him. Suddenly, a sound pierced the quiet, the unmistakable crack of a branch snapping in the distance. Jake's heart raced. Something was out there, lurking in the shadows of the trees. Without thinking, he grabbed Emily's hand. "We need to go." Together, they sprinted back toward the edge of the woods, adrenaline surging through their veins. The unknown was chasing them, and he could feel the weight of Sophie's story pressing against him, urging him to keep moving. As they burst out of the trees, the warehouse loomed ahead, but Jake's chest tightened with anxiety. He had found the letters, the truth, but now something else was chasing them. Maybe it was the shadows of Sophie's past, or perhaps it was a darker force still to be revealed. Just as they reached the door, a guttural noise echoed from within the forest, chilling him to the bone. Jake shouted, pushing Emily through the door. He could feel his pulse racing, the walls of the warehouse closing in around him. But the moment they stepped inside, something crashed against the door behind them. Jake turned, adrenaline spiking, and gasped as the shadows surrounded them, and the mystery of Sophie's life loomed larger than ever. What was buried in the past, what awaited them in the darkness, and would they uncover the truth before it consumed them both?